Hello guys, welcome to my patch review. This is the first day, meaning it's a limited sample size, but I'm going to do my best to give you guys as much information in the shortest amount of time. We're going to get started with the new hero, the Jailer. This is a nice token hero. The hero power gives you +1/+1 for 1 gold, and every time 9 minions have died, this upgrades to 2/2 and then 3/3, etc, etc. I don't think you want to play this with a regular strategy. I think you always want to push for a beast or mech board, preferably both. So when you can build a board where multiple mech tokens are dying from a mega buster, replicating menace, if you are playing beasts and you have rat pack, sewer rat, etc., this can be very decent. I've played this myself with both beasts and mechs when I tested, and it was pretty good either time. Either you're buffing a Deflectobot, or at the start you can buff a Bird Buddy when you're playing Beasts and then switch into buffing Mama Bear or Hydra. So I'd say quite solid when you are playing either a Beast or Mech strategy. I would avoid this if you don't have Beasts or Mechs available in the lobby. Then Cthulhu got buffed. You now no longer have 2 hero power for it to increase. Now it will increase regardless whether you hero powered last turn or not. That is huge for the first few turns. You no longer need to waste gold early for a very mediocre buff. The game will pretend like you press the hero power anyway. You just get that value later in the game. So I will now definitely be trying out Cthulhu. I haven't tried it out myself, but I mean, this is a strict buff. So there's no catch here. It's not worse in some cases. It's just straight better. So if you were already a fan of Cthulhu, it's just strictly better now. I'll definitely be trying it out. Then Toki, also just a strict buff. We now summon 2 minions of a higher tavern tier in the tavern rather than just the 1. I was playing as someone that made 2 6-drops early. That seemed pretty good. Once again, haven't tried it myself, but we'll definitely be trying it out. But yeah, these are just strict buffs, the Cthulhu and the Toki. Rat King, not a strict buff, but definitely a buff overall. Definitely a better hero now. The hero power used to just buff a minion of a random type, and the type would switch every turn. Now, instead of buffing a minion, it's sort of like Scabs, where you pay 2 gold and you discover a minion. Now, I think Scabs is still better. You steal from the enemy board, so the opponent you steal from is already pre-filtered, bought a good card, so you're likely to steal a good card. Rat King doesn't do that. It's just a random minion that you discover, but you don't have to be better than Scabs to be a good hero. If you're worse than Scabs but still decent, that's totally fine. So Rat King did lose his armor, so the quest is more difficult, but this is probably a trade-off that you want to make. So yeah, also want to be trying out Rat King. This is definitely a big buff. There are some damage changes. There are some armor changes. Brucon, Pyramid, Rat King are now armor tier 1, as mentioned before. Lich Bazil is armor tier 2. That's good. I don't like Lich. I like that she loses some armor. Brucon was very good. Pyramid was very good, so I can see them going to 0. Rat King preemptively going to 0 because the hero power got better. You can tell that they figured out Rat King was going to be strong. I mean, the rest doesn't really matter too much. There's a small change here with some tempo heroes getting worse, and then Toki with her buff loses some armor. Then in terms of heroes that get armor, Patchwork now having armor makes him pickable again, I'd say. Patchwork was really solid at the start of the quest meta, where quests were super important. You would just want extra health and an easy quest. Patchwork had armor. I don't think he's OP or anything now, but it was pretty much unpickable at 0 armor, and now I would probably pick a Patchwork hero there again. For the rest, not much matters here. I'd say Zephyrus was already fine. I picked Zephyrus quite a few times, so Zephyrus now getting more armor in an easy quest. That doesn't matter. I don't really like Phelan anyway. Kat and Chen are really just heroes you pick for the armor as well. So yeah, not too much here. This doesn't matter too much. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Then new quests. So yeah, as I mentioned before, big patch. Lots of stuff changed. You now have 2 different quests that you can do. One is to tip gold. So as you might already hear, this goes really well with a Tavern Tipper. If you have a Tavern Tipper on your board, I completed a quest quite easily by just tipping 3 turns in a row by having tippers. You follow the Reform curve. It's essentially just level on 6 gold, 7 gold, 8 gold, same as Reform. But instead of using your hero power to get a minion as Reform, you now just you float the gold to complete both the quest and the Tavern Tipper. So quite interesting if you have that minion on your board. This one is pretty much just have your minions attack. That can be easier if you either have like high health minions that can survive multiple hits so they can keep attacking, or you have some token minions that helps out here as well. Overall, it seems fine. Like I said, it's day one, but there's nothing here that stands out too much. Quest rewards, that's more interesting because these requirements are always very dependent on your board. The quest rewards. So Blood Goblet looked bad to me when I first took a glance at it, but I did win my game with it. So I have changed my stance on it a little bit, where it is really nice to be able to make a minion relevant immediately. So the way how it works is if you are missing 20 health, you will buff your rightmost minion plus 20 damage. So no health, that would be broken, but 20 damage. The way how you use this is you can make any unit then value trade, or maybe not value trade, but trade 1 for 1. I was fighting a ghost, and I used that ghost turn to make my Nadina deal a lot of damage so that my Nadina would kill something and then also shield my board. That was very good. If you are strong, you can put a cleave at the back to buff it and then move it to the front versus a stronger opponent. You can use this to make your Baron have high damage. You can use it on, a Selfless or any old unit that you would normally have on your board that doesn't really do much but has a nice effect. So same thing with a Bran. You can make a Bran deal a lot of damage, and now it's suddenly a useful unit. So yeah, I will have to experiment more, of course, but this was playable at the very least. Very useful to make units trade with other units. This one, Essence of Zerus, is probably a fan favorite. At the end of the turn, you get a Shifter Zerus. I have tried this out myself, and I also won that game. Felt very strong. Now, obviously, one game sample size, but the quest requirement was fairly easy. That might have been the hero I was playing on. But you essentially get a gold every turn, and sometimes that gold has also a significant impact on your board. With me, I got a glow scale early, the 5-drop that gives Divine Shield, and that just made me strong enough that I could level, and then from then on, you just need 1 or 2 more useful cards, and suddenly it's been a great quest. And after that, you just use it as 1 gold, unless you had something specific that you happen to need for your composition. But later in the game, this does turn into give you a gold every turn, because it's unlikely that the minion you get fits in perfectly with the board you already have. Hidden Treasure Vault I have not played with yet, but I can see it being good if you can knock out a requirement early. So that's again one of those things that's going to depend on how early can you complete this. You get 1 extra gold per turn. So first turn you get 11 gold max, assuming that you're already on 10, and then it just keeps getting more and more and more. So it's not quite like your Gallywix, because you don't get gold for selling cards, but you have more money. So in that aspect, you are Gallywix. Ethereal Evidence. At the start of every turn, choose 2 new rewards. So this is essentially like being a panda, but instead of discovering your hero power, you're discovering your quests. So there is a lot of flexibility here. You can do a lot of cool stuff with, turning your minions golden. Actually, I'm not even sure if Stolen Gold is in the pool, but flexibility is usually pretty damn good. So there's lots of stuff you can do with this. Again, I've only seen my opponents play it. I haven't played with it myself, but I'd say if the requirement is doable for this one, I would definitely give it a try. It looks powerful. Then Volatile Venom. I think this one is a weird one. So this one gives all your minions +8/+8. Now that sounds broken, because it's kind of like Staff, but much easier than Staff. Now the downside is when they attack, they die after the attack. So I should say after they attack, they die. Now that sounds worse than it actually is. It just means that you can't play certain compositions. Like Deflecto, for instance, with this is awful, because Deflectobot attacks, has a Divine Shield, and wouldn't die. And now with this thing, it would die. So what do you play when you have this quest? Because I have won a game with this as well. First of all, I was an Ixia, so my tokens got +8/+8. That is very relevant. And as you might suspect already, you just want tokens. You want as many tokens in the front of your board as possible, so that these tokens continuously attack and make more tokens. And then they trade very favorably, of course, because Let's say you have a rat pack, instead of that being a 1/1, it is a 9/9 now. If you have Omega Buster, same thing. Those are 9/9s or bigger, depending on if they got the Omega Buster buff. So that's like smoking gun on steroids. Now, obviously, you have the big downside that when your minions attack, they do die. So what do? You put your best minions in the back so that they never attack and they can get attacked into. So that's kind of a clever strategy. You can also taunt bigger minions. The downside is that they do die to Leroy, but on the other hand, if they attack, they kill themselves already anyway. So that's usually a downside you're willing to trade with. So you taunt your good minions, so your opponent attacks into the good minions and they value trade. But that way you get value out of your minions without actually having to attack with them. So quite a complicated quest at first glance, but it was pretty strong when I played with it. So again, I would say this is more like a beast or mech quest where you want to have lots of tokens in your comp to really take advantage of the +8 over and over and over again. Here we have Golden Hammer, Spellcraft, make a friendly minion golden until next turn. That is just super flexible. I have not played with it yet, but I mean, you can tell that that is super flexible, where you can choose anything to be golden until next turn. Kind of like Stolen Gold, but more fair, where you don't get 2 golden minions. This one as well, I assume, is easier to complete than Stolen Gold. So we'll see when I get it myself, but looks good. Oh, a side note, if you are Lady Vashj, this is Spellcraft. So with Lady Vashj, it's completely broken because she keeps the golden. Because Lady Vashj's hero power is your first Spellcraft is permanent. So you can just golden your whole board with this, turn it 1 by 1. So yeah, that is something I definitely want to try. Sinfall Medallion. So this one, every time you play a minion of a certain tavern tier, it will buff minions of that same tavern tier. So up to 2. I looked at this and was like, okay, this seems like more like a tempo quest, which it is, but I was very surprised at how well it fits in other strategies where it just helps you survive the early game. So what I did with Sinfall Medallion in my game is I started playing Murlocs, and I had Murlocs of different tavern tiers, which then allowed me to give these Murlocs some extra stats, which helps you really bridge that early game to late game transition where Murlocs are really bad in early game, really good in the late game. Part of the reason that they're really bad in early game is they have no damage on them. So Swolefin is an exception. That's a great Murloc. But a lot of other Murlocs, you just buff a lot of health with the Honcho, with the Seer. And with this medallion, I also buffed some damage on a lot of these Murlocs, which gave my board a lot more power in the early game, which saved a lot of health, which allowed me to get to the late game and win the game. So I think you can also play around this quest a bit more if you're playing with Deflectobots and you just give them a ton of extra stats by buying and selling 3-drops. I think you can also do that. So I think there's 2 ways to play this. Either you really go all in on the quest and you just get some really good Divine Shield minions or Cleaves and you just use the quest to buff. I think that's possible. I don't think that's top tier, but it's like a top 4 strategy. Or you could just use it to be strong in the early game and then try to scale with something more late game oriented. So I think either is viable. It depends on the cards you get. Then Kidnap Sack. So what this does is it just takes a minion and puts it in your hand. You take either a minion from the shop or from your board. The upside of taking from the shop is that you just have an additional minion that's +1 gold. Normally you would have to buy it for 3 gold. Now you get it for free. So very useful. The other way you can use it is you can pick up a minion from your board to replicate a battle cry or to create board space. So sometimes you'll pick up like an Uther on your board or a Primal Fin or a Toxfin and just reuse that. But sometimes you might also really need a board space to be able to play a card. We all know that when you're board locked, so this can solve that problem. But I think in the early game, you will almost always take from the shop because you want that extra value. Unless, of course, that picking up the battle cry represents more value. So you'll have to figure that out for yourself, whether the board or the shop is more value for you at that point. Okay, then there are some updates to the quests and rewards. We see that the stat buff quest, Find the Murder Weapon, has been made easier. This is because of some minion changes. Spawn and Urel are no longer in the game. We'll cover that later. but that's understandable that the stat increase quest is then easier. Anima Bribe is no longer in, which I'm a little sad about. I really like playing with this quest, but so be it. Parasol is back in. This is the quest that makes your minion, your rightmost minion, stealth and more health. So think Leapers, think Baron. And then Stolen Gold is again reduced by 50%. Now I still got it today, but obviously, you know, just more rare. Okay, so new minions. Dozy Whelp is quite good. This is something that looked good at the first glance. I was like, I don't see how this can really be bad, because when it gets attacked, it's already a 1/3 taunt, and then it just keeps getting better from that. So it's a tier 1 minion that can easily make it deep into the mid game, and I even finished a game with it where I built it up to like 80 attack or more, but that was because I was Rokara, and you know, obviously with Rokara you get a lot more attack very quickly. Something I will say is that Whelp Smuggler is super good with this during the combat. Because the buffs happen in combat, the Whelp Smuggler HP is not permanent, because the Whelp Smuggler doesn't state specifically that it's permanent. The attack is permanent, of course, because the card here states that it's permanent. That doesn't mean that it's bad, because during the fight you can gain a crap ton of health with this, especially on Rokara, because every time this kills something, it also gains an attack, and then those are very separate Whelp Smuggler procs. So yeah, this with Whelp Smuggler gives you a ton of tempo boost. Patient Scout is kind of a fun minion. So this one, when you sell it, it discovers a tier 1 minion. So that alone would be okay, because that's economy. So think about the 5 gold turn where you can buy this card, sell this card, discover a 1-drop, and then that 1-drop can be economy as well, and then suddenly you've made quite some money, where normally the turn 5 or the 5 gold turn is awkward, where you have to sell a card, buy a card. If you don't have economy, we all know that feeling. It's like, I guess I'll have 2 minions. This one solves that turn quite nicely, so on the 5 gold turn, I really like this. Now, if you are strong on the board, you can also leave it on your board, and then the longer you leave it on your board, it will discover higher tier minions. Keep in mind that you do need this on your board. It will not upgrade in your hand. It has an ability, you don't see it right here, but it'll have this little lightning icon when it's on the board, which means that it procs when it's on the board, not in your hand. So I would say be careful with this one. I'm always erring on the side of caution, so I wouldn't want to put 2 of these board and then just, all right, let's wait and let the 6 drops roll in, because it's going to take so much damage. I played it on Millhouse because it was quite cheap, and even on Millhouse it felt like I had to cash it in for a 5-drop, like a 6-drop would take so long. It's not so much the time you have to wait for it, it's the fact that you have to keep a 1/1 on your board that makes you a lot weaker. So I'd say most of the time you just cycle this for economy reasons. Also on Gallywix, for instance, this is a good money maker. But you know, if you happen to be really strong, you can try to go for a high tier menu with this. Okay, so Scrapsmith. This is the replacement for Gemspitter. We're going to cover the removed minions in a second. So I've played some Quilboar Mech. If you guys are fans of the channel, you know that I do enjoy that composition a lot. So essentially what happened here is that you can no longer run a traditional Quilboar Mech composition where you have Divine Shields and then a Gem Splitter to generate gems for your Ground Shaker. But a Scrapsmith fills the role in a bit of a weird way. So instead of getting a gem every time a Divine Shield is lost, you now get a gem every time a Taunt minion dies. I played this and won my game by Module is obviously a great minion there because you don't have to compromise. You now have Taunt and Divine Shield, so you are because when you play with Ground Shaker, you want Divine Shields on your board because buffing Divine Shields is better than buffing non-Divine Shields. Now what I had was also a Sewer Rat. I taunted a Sewer Rat because then the first body has taunt from the Houndmaster taunt that I put on it, but also the second body that spawns is also a taunt. So it's 2 gems for only 1 unit. So especially in the early game, I think that's quite good, like a taunted Sewer Rat. And then for the rest, it's just try to get Divine Shield taunts. So use a sparring partner on a Bronze Warden, put a module on a mech or so. So yeah, the Quilboar mech comp was still playable. It was just a bit awkward. Also, Dynamic Duo is suddenly quite a bit more playable in this composition now because you need taunts, and Dynamic Duo is a great Quilboar taunt. Faceless Disciple. This card is a bit weird. Battlecry discovers, not discovers, it transforms. So what that means is transformed means it just makes it. It's kind of like Malagos. You don't get to choose, it just poof, it appears. So it makes a 4-drop into a 5-drop or a 5-drop into a 6-drop. Same like with Malagos when you have the buddy, it's just an upgrade. This is very hard, very RNG heavy, because let's say if you turn a 3-drop into a 4-drop, that can be a jug, which might not be that good, especially if it's already on your board, because then you wouldn't get the battle cry value. But it might also turn into a mechano tank, which then would be amazing for the combat early. So it's very hit or miss. I tend to use this on the shop, especially when I have a little bit of gold left. One thing I will say is be careful when you play this card, because it might bug out and prevent you from playing cards. This has happened to me. So if you don't want to risk that, stay away from the card. If you do want to play the card, do it with enough time on the clock so you can still reset the game to come back into the game and actually play your card. So this is a very bad play on the rope, especially if you have to play, like a Manted Queen in your hand or so. So don't do a quick last minute check with this, because you will probably end up regretting it. Okay, so what else do we have? Right, we have Stoneborn, Vigilant Stoneborn. This is quite a fun card. It gives plus 6 HP and taunt. So when you compare that to another tier 4 buff card like Jug, Jug gives plus 6. Now this gives taunt, and you give all the health on the same minion. A lot of the time when you play Jug, the buff goes on something that you don't like anyway. So overall, I like this card when you are in need of taunt. It feels a lot better than just buying a sparring partner. Now you also get 6 health. So a little bit of a redeeming factor compared to like removing Argus. When Argus was removed, it was really a void of, I really don't want to buy a sparring partner one at a time to taunt my board. Now you get a lot more value for the taunt. You also get the 6 HP. So quite nice on a Trickster, for instance, where you want to taunt Trickster anyway, and you want more health on Trickster. So this is a perfect combination with that. Okay, Ball of Minions. I'm going to take a moment on this one, and because this might look a bit weird. So Amalgam was removed from the game, but they made this card instead. So as you can see, this is all, which means it's an Amalgam. It's all types, so you can also poison this and Divine Shield this, etc. Now, the additional effect here is that when you sell this minion, the stats goes on a random minion. So kind of like your Mutinous and your Hero Power this thing, and the stats jump to a different minion. The insane part here is that, well, first of all, if you make it golden, it jumps to 2 minions. So instead of just moving the stats from one to another, you've now duplicated the stats. That is insanely good. So if you make a golden minion, the amount of stats you gain is crazy, especially when Murlocs are out and stats really, really matter. That's really good. So I'd say this is a very, very good minion to pick up, because absolute worst case scenario, you end up selling it for +5/+5, which is fine. Think about a Wargear. A Wargear is +5/+5, but you don't get the gold back for selling. You have to magnetize. Now, obviously, the advantage of Wargear is you get to buff a shield, so you get more value from the 5/5. Now, when this minion gets really, really spicy is when you have any type of buffs in the shop. So you have an Overseer. This is now bigger. You're playing with the Yawk quest and it buffed the shop. It's now bigger. You're playing Nomi. This is now bigger. So what that means is that I played a game myself where I had a Nomi game, particularly good Nomi game. I got up to 50-50. So I just bought a ball of minions, put it on my board, sold it up +50/+50 to a random minion every time you hit this. If you have a reroll on your board, it doesn't even cost you anything. I also had some rags on my board, so I got also the +4/+4 from the initial rag buff. Absolutely insane. So this feels like something that's a bit too crazy, but obviously it's day one. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. Maybe a week from now I say, the card is okay. But for now, this feels crazy. You can do a lot of weird stuff with it. And if everything else fails, you can still just put Poison Divine Shield on it. So yeah, this seems like a minion you don't want to skip when you see it in your shop early. Right, so we have White Mane. This is a tech card that they introduced. Now you get to choose a minion on your opponent's board and taunt it. Now, obviously, you don't know where the opponent's minion is, so White Mane will taunt the minion directly across from it. So assuming you're both playing a full board or an equal amount of minions, it will taunt the minion directly in front of it. If you are playing an uneven amount, I believe that the White Mane will taunt 2 minions if she's in between 2 minions. Now, I haven't seen that confirmed yet, but that is what I've been told. So, once again, take it with a grain of salt. It's day one. So the obvious application of this card is you put it all the way on the right and you taunt their Baron and kill the Baron. This is going to open up mind games where people might put their Baron in the middle. They might put their Baron second to the right, and you may have to counter mind game them by not putting the white main all the way on the right side, but maybe one more to the left, and just assume that they put their Baron over there instead. Kind of like Tavish, where you think Tavish is going to shoot far right, so you might move your Baron one up. Now, if you're fighting against Stolen Gold, there's an extremely high likelihood that the Baron will obviously still be in the last spot because they want to make the Baron golden. So versus Stolen Gold, this is very, very consistent. You know you're going to get something juicy, right? They put something in the back, they want to make it golden, it's probably a good minion, and then you can taunt it. Now, on top of taunting it, it also makes it take double damage. So you could also use this to target an opponent's dynamic duo, or maybe even better, an untaunted big minion like a Myrmidon is a good example. Myrmidon, the card that doubles its stats. There's a very popular strategy in high MMR. People play with Quilboar and then they move the stats to the Myrmidon. So you have this 200 to 200 Myrmidon that is then golden, and it turns into a 600 Myrmidon. And this minion is very rarely near the front because people are afraid of it running into a Leroy or a Manted Queen. So if you can target that minion, taunt it, and then kill it with a Leroy, that's obviously very good as well. So yeah, I'd say it's a difficult card to use, but in some circumstances, it's going to be the perfect solution. So yeah, keep it in mind for the end game. Vanessa Van Cleef, I have not really been able to play with this card today, but it feels pretty good when I've seen it on my opponent's boards. It's one of those things where if you happen to have some pirates, this seems like a good tempo pick. It doesn't feel right now like a card you want to build around hardcore where you say, oh, I'm going to pivot into pirates and just play a lot of these. But I think it's sort of like a really nice bonus. It also works with the amalgam, obviously. So if you have a ball of minions, yeah, I'm going to call this amalgam. That's just a force of habit. But if you have ball of minions on the board, this will then buff ball of minions, and the buff is permanent, and then you can sell it. So that seems like a nice combination. So yeah, once again, I don't think you'll skip this minion. It seems like just very, very good with a lot of other cards. But yeah, so TLDR here is that I think it's a good tempo play if you have pirates on the board, but my instinct doesn't feel like this is going to be like super big engine where you always, play pirates around this, because pirates still have that core issue of they don't have cleave, they don't have shield, so they're very vulnerable to poison, they're very vulnerable to Manted Queen, Leroy, etc. So yeah, it seems like good tempo, but I think you'd still either rather play around the Hoggers or the Elizas. But totally fine in the mid game to help you win fights. Yeah, totally fine in the mid game. Okay, then we are on the last new minion here, the Walking Fort. It's the new taunt engine. It's a 6-drop that gives you +4/+4 on your 4 friendly taunt minions. So you can have 5, but then it'll just buff 4 out of 5. +4/+4, think Golden Lightfang. Pretty good getting a Golden Lightfang, just like that. I played with it and it felt pretty solid. So I think it's one of those cards where if you have the taunts already on your board, it's obviously way better. Especially if you have Divine Shield taunt. I had a Trickster. I was also playing Lady Vash, which allowed me to Divine Shield my taunts one by one by making the spellcraft permanent. So that made it feel extra good. I don't think this is a card where you're gonna like super hard pivot if you get it and you have 0 taunts. I think it's really one of those things that really supplements a board really nicely. We also see that they've implemented another card to give taunt. You have now Stoneborn. Sparring Partner was not removed, so it's just an additional option to taunt. So yeah, felt good. I think in a no Murloc lobby especially good, because making a big golden taunted Trickster is a lot easier with this. Normally you need a Fellbat as a good engine for the Trickster. This can supplement or substitute even the Fellbat. So yeah, TLDR on this minion is good if you are buffing minions that have some other aspect than taunt. So are they Divine Shield? Is it a Trickster? Is it something else? Like for instance, you can taunt up a Selfless Hero, and then the Selfless Hero gets huge, but also still Divine Shields. I also taunted up a Leroy, so my Leroy could value trade if it happened to run into a small minion, but it can now also still do Leroy things where it just kills a big Divine Shield. So yeah, I'd say be careful with the types that you are buffing. You don't necessarily want to, play it with some Imprisoners and then expect to win the game. Okie dokie. So minion updates. These are minions that were already in the game, but they were changed. Prophet of the Boar was changed to a 2/3, but it now has taunt, and the 1 per turn limitation is gone, meaning you can play 3 Quilboar, you'll get 3 gems. Overall, this is a buff. Yes, it lost 1 damage, but who cares? It has Taunt, meaning that it helps with, well, this card, walking forward, but again, not the ideal minion to buff, but it's okay to get started. But mainly here we have the Scrapsmith, which is the new gem splitter. It's the gem engine for the Quillbore. It's very good, very synergistic to have an early Quillbore card that has Taunt on it. This way, the Scrapsmith will be very relevant immediately. So yeah, this is a buff, made the early Quillbore stuff better. Taragosa was not really changed, but the wording was changed so that she doesn't keep any negative enchantments, like for instance the white mane. The white mane buff on the Taragosa would technically stick because of how Taragosa was worded. They now changed that, so it's only your enchantments. So the enemy white mane buff will not stick on your Taragosa, you don't have to worry about that. Then there were some minion pool changes. We no longer have Spawn. We no longer have Gem Splitter. We no longer have Reef Explorer. So those two are my main things that I'm sad about. I really like to play with Gem Splitter. I really like to play with Reef Explorer. I think Bran took a big hit. Reef Explorer was an insane card for Bran. So yeah, that might change my evaluation of Bran, the minion and the hero. Now, the other ones that are pretty impactful are Spawn and Urel. This makes tier 2 worse. So I have been going tier 3 early a little bit more often. I don't think that tier 2 is unplayable now, but you just don't have the Spawn or the Urel shops anymore to make them better. Those were 2 units that really made me stay on tier 2, and you no longer can roll them. Now, we do get Menagerie Mug again. This helps out a little bit with, let's say, a Jandis. You can now swap the mug. It's an extra battle cry for battle cry quests. It helps the brand a little bit, I guess, early, but you would still much rather have a Reef Explorer. Okay, that's pretty much it. The other one is a cosmetic update. I'm not really gonna go over that. So overall, it's a really fun patch. I think there's a lot of cool things in here, even though there's maybe some stuff that I might personally not love, like for instance, no Reef Explorer, no Gem Splitter. That doesn't mean that it's not a better patch. So yeah, lots and lots of things to try out. Okay, guys, it's a little scrappy, I know, but I wanted to get something out on day 1 for you. This is a popular request. Usually I take my time to get something more refined, but I figured I would put something out right now, and then once I have some more refined thoughts on the meta, I can make, you know, a nicer video. But there you go. I hope it helps, and have fun.